Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. If you don't believe me, fact check me, prove me wrong. We have a lot of fun for you tonight, including a special guest. We're going to try to cover as many cases as we can over the next hour. But really quickly, I know a lot of you have been checking in about the fires. I appreciate the outpouring of love and concern. Just to update you, it's still an ongoing disaster out here. Last I checked, I think the Palisades fire was only 18% contained. My brother is still evacuated, but his home is still standing. I have many friends. God bless everyone is alive and safe, but I have friends and friends of friends who've all lost homes. So I appreciate you all sending well wishes and prayers. It still is just something that we're going to have to take a very long time to recover from here in Los Angeles if we ever do. But for tonight, let's concentrate on other things. First of all, we're going to talk about Kouri Vallow and Donna Adelson, but you're not just going to hear it from me because we have a special guest who is GiGi from Pretty Lies and Alibis. She's going to be joining us in just 1 second. But before we get to that, for the remaining time, we have our poll, which we've all been enjoying. And these are the cases that are in the hopper if we have time left over to discuss, and that is Kouri Richins. She has an interesting issue with jury selection. They're trying to select a jury from several different counties in Utah, and we'll find out if they can do that or not. Jennifer Crumbly, we found out that the DA's office hired a PR firm to the tune of $100,000 in that case, and how that might create some issues. And then finally, David Pierce is the case about two beautiful young women who were dumped, had their bodies dumped at different hospitals here in Los Angeles. Both ended up dead tragically. And I have kind of a special connection to that case. That is an ongoing trial right now. So we'll put up that poll. We'll talk to GiGi, and we'll see what the results are at the end of our discussion. But without further delay, please welcome GiGi from Pretty Lies and Alibis. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm very well, very well. I heard that you are getting snow and that you're having a little difficulty handling that.
Look, it's the South. I mean, 1 inch of snow,
Right.
kids are out of school for a week. So we had some last week. We maybe have more coming in Tuesday. So it's people are like, it's the end of the world, you know?
We had a dusting of hail last time that it rained here in California, which it seems like it was forever ago, and you would have thought it was the fifth horseman of the apocalypse, the way that we were all responding to it. So I can imagine. Are you used to getting snow around where you live?
You know, we might get it every couple of years. It's been years since we've had a big one. But yeah, good luck finding milk and bread right now. It's like that's the two things. Lose their minds and go get all the milk and bread. So I guess they can have soggy milk sandwiches. I've never got it, but yeah, no, people go crazy.
Hey, that's a lot better than the run on toilet paper that we had during the pandemic. Do you remember that? I love that. That was the one thing everybody thought we were going to run out of was toilet paper. So
I know. I thought we were all going to go in the woods and have to get leaves at the rate people were going, but
so crazy.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you were able to spend some time with us this evening because I want to talk to you about two cases that you've been following very closely. And you have a long history with one of them in particular, and just kind of get your thoughts on these cases because there's been some developments in them. And the first, we're going to talk about Donna Adelson, but the first one I wanted to talk about was Kouri Vallow. She's got a case now out of Arizona. So, you know, for everybody who's been living under the true crime rock, you know about Kouri Vallow. She was convicted in Idaho for the murder of being, I guess, conspiracy for murder involving both her children and the wife of her then husband. Horrible, awful, horrific case. Well, if that wasn't enough dead bodies to leave in your trail, she also now, the state of Arizona, believes she's responsible for being involved in the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's husband, right? Brandon Boudreaux.
Yeah, Her ex-nephew-in-law.
Her ex-nephew-in-law. Okay.
They're divorced. She's remarried, has another kid, but I call her Melanice because there's two Melanies. It's Lori's niece. Her former husband was shot at by Alex Cox and luckily barely missed.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Arizona, because I think a lot of people know about the Idaho case, but not many people know about the Arizona case.
Yeah, Charles was the very first victim in this whole saga. And Lori very abruptly left Charles when Chad came in the picture. There was some reconciliation in the middle of that, but really Lori was just trying to get his finances in order for her because we fully believe she knew the plan. And Charles came into town to see his son JJ, who was living with Lori and Tylee there in Chandler. And at that point, Charles was in Texas. He had moved back to Texas and just went to go see him. And as soon as he walked in the door, he was shot and killed. And there's a whole side of their story, which is that Charles got mad because Lori took his phone and a little tussle ensued. Tylee got the bat and was telling Charles to back away. We don't believe any of that. Really just think where his body was lying when first responders and police arrived, he was just down that first step right past the door. So I don't think he really was in that house 30 seconds before he was shot and killed. And interestingly enough, if you go back, and I did an episode on this, and if you watch all three of their statements in the police station right after this happened, just maybe an hour after, there are so many discrepancies in their stories. And unfortunately, that really wasn't caught until the kids went missing. And Tammy Daybell dies, that they say, wait, her husband was shot and killed in July. You know, all this came like in October, November. So it really wasn't until the kids went missing that they started taking a second look at Charles and realized this doesn't add up.
That's one of the questions I had for you, is that this predates everything, but it sounds like the murder investigation doesn't. So they didn't open up an actual investigation on this until after the children went missing in Idaho?
I think they were investigating it, but they really just told everybody, the families, that this was self-defense because Alex Cox had a little boo-boo on the back of his head. He said that Charles hit him in the head with the ball bat. Now, Charles was a semi-pro professional baseball player. If Charles had to hit Alex with that bat, it would have been lights out. And Charles was a very fit man. So in fact, in the police video, when Alex is sitting outside the house, he keeps rubbing the back of it to keep it bleeding, in my opinion, because my thought is that Lori probably whacked him in the head with the bat just to try to further their story of what happened.
And is the theory that this was kind of the first murder taking place in order for Lori and Dave and Chad to eventually end up together?
I think that's part of it, but also Lori thought that there was a $1 million life insurance policy to her, but Charles actually, before he passed away, put Kay Woodcock, his sister, as the beneficiary, unbeknownst to Lori. And she called the day of, maybe the day after Charles was murdered, trying to go ahead and get the process started to cash that in. And then we have text messages between her and Chad when she found out it was Kay Woodcock that was the beneficiary and not her. She ends up and texts Kay and says, he left us with nothing. Well, he left the kids with money because he told Kay, you're going to be the one ending up with JJ. That was really what Charles envisioned. Charles kind of knew, I think, that they were out to get him. So he was smart enough to do that to where Lori didn't get her hands on that. But then she was doing the math in these text messages of what she would get from the government, since Charles was the legal parent through adoption of JJ. She was doing the math with Chad of what she would get with Charles's benefits along with whatever JJ got as government assistance for being autistic. But I think a lot of that motive really was financial, although, as part of their plan, Charles had to unfortunately be killed too.
Incredible. Just incredible. Yeah. The way that these people really do view others as just these kind of pawn pieces, these monopoly pieces in this game of them trying to get money and gain, I don't know, power, position. I don't know what else, but they just have a cavalier view towards the lives of other people. It's frightening and disturbing. Now,
yeah, and Chad Daybell actually referred to, I believe, everybody as obstacles. That was the word he used. So really, I think in the end, that's what they were to Chad Morey. Were just obstacles that need to get out of the way.
Problems that you just need to eliminate.
Right. Yep.
Now, the part about this that's become fascinating to me from a lawyer's perspective is that she was at one point in Idaho declared incompetent to stand trial. She actually spent quite a bit of time getting mental health care, and that's why they separated the two trials between her and Chad. And then she was again eventually regained competency, but that became an issue again in Arizona. And not only did the judge find her competent in Arizona, and just as a side so people understand, I'll explain what competency is in just a moment. But not only did they declare her competent, she's actually representing herself now in Arizona, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the hot mess express is what I call it. But, Lori is the smartest person in the room, I think, in her eyes. And also, Lori loves the limelight. So I think this is, and the thing is this, she's convicted and sentenced to life in Idaho, and the trial for Charles, and then the last trial for Brandon, that wraps up all of her judicial issues she has to face. And I really think after that, she's going to fade into the bowels of the prison. We won't hear much from her at all. So I think part of it is her wanting that limelight for her last hurrah in front of the cameras.
I think you're absolutely right. I think she may be competent to stand trial, but there's obviously severe mental issues going on with this person. Putting aside the fact that you took part in the murder of your own children and the murder of your ex-husband and the murder of your new husband's wife, putting aside the murderous person that you are, she is obviously not operating on the same playing field as any of us. And I think you're right. I think that part of that is that she is kind of enjoying the spectacle of all of this. But I wanted to explain kind of competency here, and then we'll talk about how that is leading to chaos. What did you call it? The big mess express, or
I call it the hot mess. I say she's the captain of the hot mess express.
Yes, she is. And it is full steam ahead in Arizona. But what has happened is competency is just a very low standard. It's not about sanity. Sanity has to do with being untethered to reality and not able to understand the consequences of your actions. Competency, you can have severe mental problems and still be considered competent to stand trial. It's just the basics of, do you understand who the judge is? Do you understand who the prosecutor is? Do you understand you're on trial for murder? Very low level type stuff. She is past that. She's seen some, she's been evaluated and everyone feels that she's competent. Okay. But then beyond that, she's asked to now represent herself. And what's interesting about that is that it is a constitutional right to have an attorney. And like any constitutional right, you can waive that right if you do so knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. And a judge, through some very thorough questioning, found that yes, she did. So she's allowed to represent herself. And even if that means that she puts on a defense that might be, like I said, untethered to reality, that might include some very fringe religious beliefs. And it sounds like it will not only include that, but also is just going to include a bunch of other nonsense. And I'm kind of using that as a segue for you to introduce us into some of the things she recently kind of tried to argue in court.
Yeah, and it was interesting because the motions that she's filed so far, they've all been denied, but they have nothing to do with Charles's murder. To me personally, I think a lot of it is she's on a fishing expedition to see. One of the things she wanted was communication between all the different agencies, the FBI, Gilbert PD, which investigated Brandon's attempted murder, Chandler, which handled Charles's murder. You had oh gosh, it's escaping me, the agency that handled Tammy Daybell's murder. She wanted all of their different communications. I think she wants to find out what they were saying about her and how they caught her. I really, because nothing has been relevant to Charles's murder. And so it goes to show you there that, is she representing herself as an opportunity before she fades away to see exactly how they got her? And then the other thing she wanted to know was any filings or any communications about her extradition, which happened after she was found guilty in Idaho, has nothing to do with the murder of Charles. So she's overreaching. But to me, it just seems like, well, I'm my own attorney. I want everything you guys have. She mentioned you give me 100 and something pages to satisfy me, but it wasn't what she wanted to read. She knew what happened with Charles. She wants to know how they nailed them down, I think, and got them for the charges they faced, and really how that investigation progressed is my guess.
And you point out exactly what is the problem in many of these cases where defendants try to represent themselves pro per. It's not that they're not a lawyer and going to do a poor job of defending themselves. It's that they usually go on these side quest campaigns fueled by their own curiosity or their own just kind of ego. Like you said, she just wants to, she's curious. She wants to know how they caught her. She wants to know why they're extraditing her, a bunch of other things that do nothing to actually defend her, but just satisfy her own curiosity. I've thrown up here for everybody to see. This was the latest minute entry because she made these motions to order the state of Arizona to produce discovery of extradition. Not even quite sure what the hell that means. I think she's just saying she wants anything and everything relating to her extradition. And the reason I wanted to throw this up is that the judge took it upon himself, rather than just denying it, he takes it upon himself to highlight the defendant has failed to establish there is any relevance to the requested documents, nor that the disclosure of extradition documents would be reasonably likely to lead to any discoverable information related to the crimes. This is what we're going to see, unfortunately, I think, again and again and again with her, is this nonsense. It's not that she's not going to know how to cross-examine someone. It's not that she's not going to know how to make arguments. It's that it's going to just be full of nonsense.
I agree. But I'm going to tell you what, Josh, I will walk from Greenville, South Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona to see her cross-examine Kay Woodcock. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Kay is ready. I thought maybe Kay might be upset when she found out Lori was representing herself. It was like Christmas for Kay, because she wants that one-on-one with her where they have to look each other in the eyes, because, you look at Kay and Larry, they lost JJ, but Kay lost her brother too, and Lori has just, that I'll never forget that very first arraignment in Rexburg. And she walks right past Kay and just sticks that chin up in the air with a grin. And Kay's shooting darts at her. Like, if looks could kill, Lori would have fell over right there. And so, yeah, I think that Kay's ready. She's like, let's go, let's do it. But I think Lori's underestimating too what she's getting into with some of these witnesses. Kay will be professional, but could it maybe throw Lori off to have to look Kay in the eye? And could it force her?
I mean, you probably know more than me, but I think when you're dealing with someone who is so wrapped up in their own ego, in their own head, their own narcissism, I don't think so. I think that they probably will enjoy the fight. I think that they probably, like you said, she's doing this to get herself more attention. And even if that's bad attention, she obviously doesn't care. So one of the things that took place during this kind of hearing that they had is the judge asked her, point blank, what does any of this have to do with your charges? And one of her responses I thought was interesting to our point is she said, there's a lot of things that are mystery questions to the defense that we are entitled to according to the law. Not only is that wrong, but it also just shows you she's just using this as kind of her fun and games because she's spending the rest of her life in prison anyways.
Exactly. Yeah. And she doesn't quite understand that all of the evidence she's not entitled to. She's entitled to what is relevant to Charles's murder, not anything in Idaho, not anything having to do with extradition. So I'm curious to see what future filings we have. I really just feel like, because when she talked about the different agencies and how they were all talking, I just thought she just wants to see what they're saying about her.
Yeah.
100%.
So one question I have for you, and I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, is I was surprised that they're trying her separately for the murder charge of Vallow and the attempted murder of Boudreaux. Do you know why that is? Why they separated those?
I'm not sure. I guess, maybe it gets a little bit difficult given the fact that Charles was actually murdered and there was just the attempt on Brandon. I really don't know. I mean, it would have been easier, obviously, for the families to just have one joint trial and be done, because they've been in this for over 5 years now. But no, they separated those. That's the only thing I can think. And plus, it's two different. You've got Chandler doing Charles, and you have Gilbert Police Department with Brandon. So I'm not really sure why. It seems it would be more economical to just do it at once, because you're going to have a lot of repeat witnesses, because they did, investigate as a unit, really, Chandler and Gilbert especially, because they were right there. But no, it's interesting. And, but unfortunately, these families are going to have to go for two.
Are they related motive wise? Like, is there a connection as to why they took place?
I mean, I really feel like the attempt on Brandon, again, was for insurance money. Brandon, very successful young man, was married to Lori's niece. And again, she abruptly left her husband. He was blindsided, but obviously a nice insurance policy there. He's a planner, 4 kids, and had a job where he made a lot of money. So I really feel like at least those two the motive was rooted in money. And Tammy Daybell too, because Tammy had a life insurance policy that Chad cashed out, or I guess maybe the life insurance policies were, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but a bonus, because they had to get rid of the spouses anyway in their mind, instead of just saying, hey, look, I found somebody, I'm going to divorce you. Kay and Larry, you can have JJ. Anybody would have taken in those kids, but they had to be dead. And so for me, is it just the life insurance policy? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to tell with them.
Maybe there was a concern too that somehow it would prejudice the cases, that people would feel like, well, if she tried it once, she obviously committed the murder again. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to come up with a good reason, because every reason you point out seems like a good reason why they should have kept them together. Let's take some questions from people who've been asking questions along the way. But one point I wanted to make while we're doing that is that you make an excellent point too. Not only is this going to be a mess to watch her go through this trial from just a onlooker's perspective, but think about, her cross-examining these people who've been victimized by her, that just the trauma of them having to go through that is going to be kind of an ugly thing to witness as well. But Louisa says, is it possible that Lori suddenly wakes up one day to the very realization of what she did? What do you think? Do you think there's that she is so deep into the Kool-Aid that there's any coming back for her, or do you think there's a chance she might realize the profound evil she's committed?
Oh man, with her, I don't know. She just has this loaded God complex. And, she did an interview with her son, Colby Ryan. That's on his YouTube channel. I highly recommend you guys go listen to it. But he just played a conversation he had with his mom on the phone, and she tried to insinuate maybe Tylee accidentally did something to JJ and then did something to herself. It was all over the place. But what stood out to me is in the couple of conversations Colby has shared, she's very deeply rooted in the, you don't understand, essentially you're not on my level spiritually to understand why. I really, I think she's competent. I've always said from the very beginning, when the police came knocking, she gave very elaborate lies in regards to Charles and JJ being missing, that she knew if she said, no, they were zombies, we killed them, she goes right to jail. But I do think that maybe she is so far down the rabbit hole with this whole religious delusions or whatever, maybe not. And I think too, that would have to be a situation where Lori admits she was wrong. And I don't think that'll ever happen. She'll always feel she was justified in her own sick reasons. So I don't think so. I don't see it happening, but you never know. I mean, enough time passes, and who knows if they're talking, if Lori and Chad are talking, they could still be talking this religious stuff. You know, one thing that came out at trial for Chad was there were thousands of conversations between the two of them, and it was a lot of this religious wackadoodle stuff. So, I really think that Lori's more rooted in that than Chad, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I mean, I hope she does. I hope she does realize what she did, at least so that she can suffer just a fraction of what everybody who knew and loved these people who were killed for no reason have gone through. But I wouldn't put any money on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. She seems very entrenched into these beliefs. And you would think that if she were going to have a epiphany, that would have come when it was when she had the ability to save her own skin and during her own trial, but she didn't. And she was still, even in her own sentencing statements, she's still very much believing these fringe beliefs that she has. But I will say, a cure for that is a lot of time spent in prison and a lot of time spent away from people feeding you that kind of information. And who knows? Joanne,
one thing just to add to that, I didn't mean to interrupt, but at her trial, the day that the medical examiner was coming to show autopsy photos, if you remember, she wanted to just go back to jail. She didn't want to sit in there.
Right.
And we saw all the deputies go in there. I totally believe she was medicated because by the end she was dozing off. But for me, that was very curious because sorry, let me bump my mic one more time. But in her mind, she knows what she did, but seeing those photos, would that have in her mind triggered that realization that it's not this fantasy in her head that she's called to do this in the world? That was just something I've always thought of, because it was, a good 15, 20 minutes of them having her back there. And the judge ruled, you will stay here for this. She never looked at those autopsy photos, though. I watched her the entire time. And by the end, her chin was down and they had to kind of nudge her when court was over for the day. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it could have been a crack in this kind of crazy armor of hers. Yeah. Joanne M. Jedi Platypus says, do we know if the trial will definitely be streamed? Do you know that?
That's my understanding. Arizona is very liberal with allowing live streaming, and all of her hearings have been live streamed. So my understanding at the moment is yes, we will be able to watch both trials.
Excellent, because I know that's a case that a lot of people who've been, like I said, following these trials from the time that her saga, from the time she was in Idaho till now, people want to see it all the way through. All right, let's move on to the other case I wanted to talk to you about tonight, which is Donna Adelson. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to remind everybody that we have a poll up for the other cases we're going to try to cover if we have time. That is Kouri Richins, has some issues with jury selection. Jennifer Crumbly, the DA's office hired a PR firm. That one fascinates me. I hope we talk a little bit about that. And then the David Pierce trial kicking off here in Los Angeles. But Donna Adelson, okay. The recent thing to happen, though, is that she had this change of venue request. Can you talk us through a little bit about the background leading up to this filing by her defense attorneys? Because it's a little different. It's not just the idea that, hey, a lot of people know about this case, therefore we can't get a fair trial. They're actually pointing to some specifics.
Yeah. And they pointed right to us podcasters a couple of times in that filing. But just aside from the obvious, Tallahassee, this is an older case. A lot of people have heard it. It's been covered a lot. One of the arguments in there was that there was an in-camera hearing for a motion in limine. And this was regarding the testimony of her oldest son, Robert Adelson, who is estranged from the family and actually was on a podcast, Over My Dead Body, I believe, where he talked about this since the murder. But the transcript for that in-camera hearing was accidentally posted on the website where all of her filings go, and it was there for quite a while. And I did an episode on it. I read through it, and essentially what they said in that transcript is, of course, Robert is no fan of his mother. They insinuated he told them he thinks that she was involved, and had some choice words that were very highly opinionated about his mom, and they did not go into those opinions. There was something about a racial slur that all sides don't want to go to the jury. So you start to see this move from just, the jury pool is tainted there in Tallahassee to this transcript was online. It's been done by podcasters, guilty as charged, and it shouldn't have been out there, which further inflames everything about Donna, essentially. And that, the racial slur was mentioned, and his opinion was she's sharp. Nobody's going to pull the wool over her eyes. And there was something in there that was very briefly mentioned, that something about not bringing in prior bad acts, where she had admitted something to Robert Adelson. So they didn't go into any detail about it. So I'm very curious about that. Was this having to do with something regarding Dan Markel or something in the past? So clearly his deposition was full of fireworks, and the defense does not want, they're just, that was a big part of this filing.
Yeah. Thank you for giving that background. One thing I didn't realize until I was researching it today, but when you read kind of the news titles, it's like, media and, podcasters cover sealed documents. And it made it almost sound like there was this nefarious effort on the part of people covering this case to get this sealed information out there. It was up for several weeks, publicly available. If these defense attorneys are so bothered by it, why weren't they aware that it was publicly available for all this time? So that's kind of an aside. I mean, I still think they make a point here in what they're saying, but it's like, don't all of a sudden act like you're clutching your pearls in such, a shock by the behavior of everyone, when this was out in the open for several weeks. We're not talking hours. We're not talking minutes. We're talking about several weeks just sitting on a public website. So this is the motion. And the essentially comes down to what's in paragraph 4 here, is that the sealed transcript, and it was a goof up by the clerk. The clerk should have sealed it. Everybody thought it was sealed. In defense of the defense attorneys I just attacked, I probably don't check when stuff is sealed after I ask the court to seal it. I just assume it's sealed. But so it was sealed, and it was it included an opinion from him that was inadmissible.
Right.
And then after giving all of this background, they go on to say the crux of what they're trying to say here is that in this paragraph here, he can't receive a fair trial because of the publicity, and because of this revelation, it has become so impossible for him to get a fair trial in Leon County. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that, because like I said, they're pointing to something specific that is out of the ordinary. It is out of the ordinary for something like this to be released and covered, but they're saying that alone should lead to a change of venue. Do you think that carries any water?
Not really, because it's a shocker to us that follow true crime, but not everybody does. And not everybody seeks out this information, and not everybody watches Dateline. I know a lot of people who have no clue about these cases. Granted, we're in South Carolina, but Tallahassee is big enough. I think you definitely could find an impartial jury there, because I'm sure you have that group that has followed this since day one. But this murder is over 10 years old. People have moved out. People have moved in. And so I just don't think that this is a big deal. I don't think the stuff about Robert Adelson really made it far on. I think it was covered more by podcasters who really like check this site every day to see what's going on. Clearly I didn't. It was up for weeks. I grabbed it really right before it was taken down. Just getting through Christmas, I kind of slacked off a bit. But no, I think they'll find a jury there in Tallahassee. It's just, it's not a tiny town. It's a college town. But again, people don't, spend their days and evenings like we do researching these cases and looking for every little new piece of evidence that comes out. And they specifically named the Tallahassee Democrat, which is a great local paper that's had wonderful in-depth coverage on this case. So they ran with this. And I guess with that being a local publication too, it gave them a good argument as to, well, we've got local publications doing stories on this that should have been sealed. But, we'll see. They didn't grant Charlie one. And of course, that was something they complained about in the jail calls in the hours after his conviction, is that they didn't move it out. But they didn't move it out for him. I don't really see why they move it out for Donna.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I feel like this has become almost like the argument du jour. And you see that people really kind of run with it. The idea that, this case is so much publicity on it, and there's no way they can find an impartial jury in this neighborhood. I will tell you, I have worked on cases that are incredibly high profile, with involving figures that you would think everybody knows, and you pull in a group of just random citizens from the public who just happen to answer their jury service summons, and you get people that have no idea what you're talking about. They're too involved with their kids. They're too involved with Little League. They're too involved with their local, baseball team, or what's going on with the Kardashians or something else. They just have other things going on with their life. And even if they do, they kind of know the broad headlines, but they're not in the weeds, like you said, with people who follow this stuff. So I agree with you. I think that argument is becoming a tougher one to make when you know the reality of kind of how people live their lives. But this is the point you were trying to point out here in paragraph 31. They say that despite him giving this inadmissible opinion, and the opinion essentially is that he believes he kind of danced around the idea, it sounds like, that he believes his mother's guilty. It's somehow that is an opinion that he holds, and that they wouldn't allow him to give that opinion. And that was covered by the Tallahassee Democrat, as you mentioned. And then they go on to say, as well as a plethora of podcasters. And there's one of the guilty parties right there.
Guilty as charged, Josh, right here. Oh, I was all over that. I ain't gonna lie. I couldn't get that episode out fast enough. but it was there for me to get. So what do you do?
No, you did exactly what you did. You did nothing wrong. It was there for weeks. I don't think anybody can point fingers at you, but it is funny to me because you make an excellent point. People who watch and listen to your podcast anyways, let's say, are probably not going to be selected for this jury anyways, regardless if you had covered this sealed document or not. Those are just people who are so involved in the true crime world, they're probably going to not make it on this jury anyways. But it was funny to me how they really highlighted, this is later on, they say, it is important to consider the particularly damaging effects of internet-based publicity in this case. And I wanted you to respond to this piece here that they point out. Perhaps of most concern, I can't highlight it well. Perhaps of most concern is that the internet provides avenues for publication by those who feel less bound by standards of accuracy, fairness, and objectiveness. Are they name calling GiGi?
That was definitely shots fired for sure. But here's the thing: not everybody does the rumor and speculation. I literally keep that out of my podcast. So yeah, it can be like the Wild West in some, corners of the true crime world. But for the most part, no. I mean, it's look, I'll crack a joke at Donna's expense all day long because sometimes she makes it easy. But at the same time, to kind of put everybody in that broad generalization that every podcaster has no ethical boundaries, a lot of us, I mean, I would say most of us create those for ourselves if you're doing it for the reasons of following the case in an ethical manner and not just doing it to get, a good payday from YouTube. Yeah.
Right.
Could you want to make this a sideshow? Of course. But why would you do that? There's still victims' families out there that have not had justice to the fullest extent. And, that's Donna and any other indictments that may come in the future. So, yeah, I mean, you can find it out there, but majority of podcasters are reporting what's being put out there, including stuff that should have been sealed.
And on the other side of that, they then go on to say where journalists' careers may be broken on ethics violations, bloggers are writing in the wild west of cyberspace. And the part that cracked me up about this is like, sir, you are obviously do not have your finger on the pulse of modern day journalism if you think that they are so bothered and tethered to the ethics of what they're reporting. Just pick up any newspaper or watch cable news anymore, and there is a lot of Wild West going on there for sure.
I think more Wild West in other areas of interest than true crime, because for the most part, podcasters, people like me who have no legal background, but just, have a love of justice and watching that judicial process unfold, we all have ethics. It's not like, I mean, there have been some that have totally crossed lines, with putting out things that shouldn't have been put out there, very sensitive things. But, I always say if I put something out there that puts a case in jeopardy or hurts the victims' families, I'll walk away, because that's not why I do what I do. And back to what you said, it's 2024. You're not going to stop the true crime YouTube train. So you may as well just kind of hop on board and trust that more times often than not, those of us who do this are just reporting. It's a different way of reporting. We're able to dive deep. We're not bound by a 3-minute sound clip. We can go 8 episodes if we need to. I've done over 100 on Lori Vallow, but that's what the true crime community craves. And it ain't going to stop. And, true crime tends to be that one genre that people say, oh, gross. A lot of people just don't understand what it is that we aim to do, which is just to go deeper in these filings and talk about things that people on network TV just don't have the time to talk about. It's not all nefarious and, let's start a petition and try to get Donna found guilty. It's just not like that. But I understand it's their argument. But yeah, I felt like I was kind of getting scolded when I was reading that. I was like, oops.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at first I thought they might have had some actual teeth to their argument, but the more I read through their papers, I thought, you know what, you're being a little shocked for the sake of being shocked. And I wonder if it was more just to kind of draw attention to the judge that this is a high profile case, as if he wasn't aware of that ahead of time. Shelby says, I never get the argument that people could watch the pretrial hearing, so it's tainted. If they're watching coverage, they wouldn't be on the jury. Good point. I mean, listen, we don't live in a world where you're going to just have people who've heard zero about a case or not. Sometimes people are going to make it on a jury that may know a little bit about it, but it really comes down to their bias, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not a prerequisite of being a juror on a case like this that you've never heard the name Dan Markel, Donna Adelson, Charlie Adelson. It's, can you be fair and impartial? And, of course, they're going to ask these people, have you watched Dateline on this? Have you listened to podcasts? If they say yes, I feel like those are going to be gone. But you'll find your 12 and your alternates, or is it 6 in Florida? Is it 6 or I don't know. You'll find your people.
It's going to be 12 because it's murder.
Okay. So, you'll find your people. It's not that hard. I mean, look, I'm about to cover a huge case here in Greenville. Should have started Monday. Now it's going to be next month because they sent out 150 something jury summons and only 50 or some odd of those actually showed up. And then when they said it's going to be a 3-week trial, they were like, no, can't do it. And you don't know the number of people here locally that I've had to explain this case to because they'd never heard of it, even though one of the biggest murders in Greenville County in a long time, and they just didn't know about it. I feel like it's going to be the same in Tallahassee with this, even though it's a 10-year-old case and you've had 3 trials.
I get it all the time. Even with my lawyer friends, I'll say, oh, well, it's like that Karen Reed case. And they're like, what? And it's something where you're like, how do you not know about this? It seems so huge in the world that we deal in. And they're like, they're lawyers, they eat criminal lawyers, defense attorneys. They're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, dude. They just don't follow these things, Top Cat 88 makes the point that defense counsel seems to be obsessed with social media these days. They follow it closely. I completely agree. They do seem to be far more interested in what's happening on Twitter and elsewhere and YouTube than they used to be even just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and it was funny because in one of the filings they did a few months ago, they actually had a link in the filing to my YouTube page for a jail call. And I was like, I made it in that's weird, just to see your YouTube page right there. But it is true, but it's the biggest medium for true crime now. You have your networks, you have Dateline, you have, all your shows that cover this like 2020, but the internet, the YouTubers, the content creators, they're the ones checking that page every day for new filings because people that closely follow this trial, that's what they want. So yeah, I understand the focus really is focused online, and there is some validity to say it's unregulated for the most part, because unless somebody produces your podcast, you're on your own and you have to decide ethically what you're going to do and what lines you're not going to cross. And so but it's a free world. So if I wanted to go on my YouTube channel and spin a bunch of rumor and speculation, it's not right, but it's my right. And that's just where we are in 2024. We're connected online and there are a million platforms to tell these stories. And it's just the way it is.
And I think it's a net good overall, and people need to just get used to it.
Yeah.
Tiny Grandma, thank you so much for the super sticker. Pammy says, can I just say how much I love Josh and Gigi right now? Oh, we love you too, Pammy. Thank you so much for that. And then Ashley says, I echo Pammy. So thank you so much, Ashley. This has been an absolute treat. You are wonderful. I thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this. I appreciate the channel and community that you've created. And I think that has to do with how much you do care about getting it right. And I thought you were the person to talk to about that kind of Donna Adelson issue, in that I feel like you are doing more to make sure that what comes out of your mouth is is based on facts than a lot of these so-called mainstream journalists are. So I wanted to applaud you for that.
I appreciate that so much.
Well, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening. I appreciate everything you do, and I will hopefully be talking to you again soon. Okay.
Yes, sir. And thanks to all the listeners. I've been reading your comments. You guys are awesome. So we will see you soon. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. Before I let you go, is there anything you want people to know about, a new video or something you have coming up that you want to make sure people check out?
No.
Okay.
No, I was just going to say real quick. No, I'm going to be, obviously following this case closely. So anything new I will put out there, but I just want to say that your episode on the Jake and Angela Wagner sentencing was so spot on. I mean, just craziness there. My listeners absolutely were amening you the whole time they were watching. So good job on that. Never seen nothing like that in my life. Woo.
Yeah, that was a mind-blowing situation. I really I think it's a kind of what do they call it? Stockholm syndrome, where I've just been so ingrained to respect the bench and everything they do that it's hard for me to sometimes criticize judges. But I really feel that was off the rails type of behavior, and more than anything, just a miscarriage of respect towards the victims in that case. It was a really really unfortunate. I mean, I still can't wrap my head around it.
You and me both, bud. Well, you have a great night. Thanks to all your followers and my people that are here. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. She's fantastic. Always love chatting with her, and she does. If you guys don't know about her channel, Pretty Lies and Alibis already, and I'm sure that all of you do, but if you don't, please go check it out. Where are we at on the poll? What do we got? Kaylin, 61% for Kouri Richins. All right. That's what we will talk about then with the few remaining minutes that we have here. This was interesting with Kouri Richins. Not an issue that I saw coming up in this case. So just so that you guys get the background of what happened, they are, and it's so funny, there is kind of a common theme this evening with these cases where they all seem to be about this real concern that defense attorneys have in these cases that are high profile and whether or not they're going to get a fair shake out of their jury pool. And I don't know if it's a trend or if I'm just noticing it more, but you've got cases like Bryan Kohberger where they're asking to move it completely out of one county and to the other side of the state and handle it because they feel like they can't get a fair shake there. And it's not like this is a new thing to reinvent the wheel as far as a change of venue, but usually you saw it in the most extreme of situations where it was just the community was so small that there was no way you could pool people who weren't affected by the trial. Now you're starting to see it in larger communities, larger cities where people are still feeling like they can't get a fair trial. So Bryan Kohberger moves his trial. Now you've got Donna Adelson wanting to move her trial. It's this constant kind of idea that this has been in the news, it's been covered, therefore everyone around here is tainted, whether they know it or not, they're all tainted, and we can't get a fair trial. So something similar is happening in the Kouri Richins case out of Utah, but they're handling it a little differently. They're trying to address the problem differently than in Adelson. In Adelson's case, they were asking for a straight change of venue. In the Kouri Richins case, they're not asking to change venue. They're just asking to pull jurors from other counties as well. So instead of just having it take place where they pull jurors, potential jurors, from the county in which the case is going to be tried, they're not asking to move it to a larger county or to a county where there might not be people who know about the case. They're just saying, let's pull jurors from other counties. And that's a clever way of handling it, I think. It doesn't put the stress on moving the witnesses, moving all of law enforcement, moving the holding of the defendant, all of that other kind of logistical nightmares that come along with it. It's just the idea of, okay, well, if we're having trouble finding impartial people here, let's just broaden our base. Let's broaden the net of which we pull jurors from. But that might be a problem. One, it's created a problem with how do you bring all these jurors from other counties away? Are you going to because usually you get a jury summons and that should be something relatively close to where you live. It's rare that you're going to get a jury summons to ask you to travel a couple hours away from your home to go to jury service. That would be considered an undue burden, and I imagine give a lot of those jurors a reason to get off of the jury. So first there was this question about, well, we want to voir dire them remotely. Both sides said, we don't want to deal with that. We don't want to deal with remote voir dire. We got to see these people in person. I agree with that. They should have the opportunity to voir dire these people in person because there is nothing that can replace seeing a person, speaking to a person, watching that person's body language and feedback as you're talking to them. And lots of times you're observing other jurors while you might be questioning one juror. You're seeing the response of other jurors and taking note of it. So there's nothing like in-person questioning of a jury. The judge said, yes, I agree with that. You can do this in person. But where the problem came from is this idea of pulling from multiple counties. And the appellate court essentially shut that down and said you can't do it. And now it's before the Utah Supreme Court. to try to see whether or not it runs afoul of the law in Utah to pull jurors from different counties. There's an argument to be made that it does, because even according to the judge, it said that it was unclear if it's allowed according to the state jury selection law, which speaks about, quote unquote, the county where jurors are coming from in the singular form rather than the plural. But here's my bigger question is, why create these problems? Why create, you already know you're doing something different. Even according to everybody's understanding of this, if they were allowed to pull from multiple counties, it would be the first time that they've ever done this. And it might not be a big issue to do this. And in fact, the defense is asking for it just as much as the prosecution. But again, my question is, why are you doing something different? Why are you creating problems? Why are you possibly creating unforced errors? And that's what I see come up again and again and again in these high profile cases, is that everybody tries to do it a little fancy and a little different, and something that they've never done before, they try on this case. You've got a huge case. This is arguably one of the bigger cases to be handled in Utah in a very long time. The nation is watching. The true crime community for sure is watching. Courtroom Confidential's all over it. And you're going to use this case to be the case where you decide to try something a little bit different. Now, maybe it works out just fine. But if she gets convicted, what do you think is going to be item number one on her appeal? It's going to probably be to do something with, this was illegal the way that jury selection took place. Because according to the law in Utah, they can only select from the county in which the blah, 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 whatever the statute says. It always never ceases to frustrate me when you see these cases and they just try to get a little too fancy and they start making decisions that don't need to be made, and they start treating the case very differently than any other case. I feel like a lot of those troubles and problems would be avoided had they just handled it like they would any other case. Point in fact, and I don't know where it fell on the poll, but it just made me think of it. Point in fact is in the Jennifer Crumbly case. The prosecutors in that case, this is one of the things we were going to talk about, and I'll just do it quickly in the last few minutes that we have here. The prosecutors in that case are alleged to have paid $100,000 in taxpayer money for a PR firm just to handle the publicity of this high-profile case that they were handling. And now the defense is saying that that was special treatment and that infected the jury pool, and that created a prejudice against their client, and that they granted special access to the Washington Post that no other media had access to during a gag order, and that ABC produced a documentary, and all of this stuff that was treating this case so differently. And you can just see all of these prosecutors in these counties, and it's the first time somebody's ever put a microphone in front of their face, and all of a sudden they lose their minds and they start to treat it differently, and it creates problems. And there's Exhibit A, is Jennifer Crumbly making an appeal based upon the mere fact that they spent $100,000 in taxpayer money to hire a PR firm. What do you need a PR firm when you're the DA's office? You know what we did in the DA's office? We said we will allow the facts to speak for themselves inside of the courtroom. You know how much that cost? Absolutely nothing, because that's pretty much what I got paid when I was a DA. It just never ceases to frustrate and amaze me. All right. You guys have been fabulous. I want to thank some of our new members. We had quite a few in the last week. True Crime with Amanda, Crazy Mom RN, Sheila Duffy, Crystal DeSaro, Joy W, Akasha 4986, Teresa Clay, Tammy Lashley, Elizabeth H, Lorby 823, Fran Suss Siegel, Texas Sunshine, and Josephine Alessi. I love to say all of your names who have taken the time to actually sign up to our membership program. So thank you guys all so much. If you don't know about our membership program, we put a lot of time and energy. Tiffany and Kaylin work on that all the time to make sure that you guys are getting great content. If you want to learn more about it, you can sign up on our YouTube site. You have to go on the computer and click on the join link. So please check that out. What did you miss on Monday? We did a live top 10 cases to look forward to in 2025. We had a lot of fun. A lot of you were there and a lot of great questions and interactions. Check that out. Stay tuned for this Friday will be our normal Friday show, but we have the second episode of Sunday Fun Day coming up on January 19th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And you know what I'm going to ask you to do? I'm going to ask you to please go to thecourtroomconfidential.com. And I'm going to ask you to press on this button right here. And that is to send a voice message. And we've already received a few from you guys, and they are fantastic. And we're going to play them on Sunday, and we're going to take questions and take comments and respond to all the questions, voice messages that you guys have left for us. And I will tell you, they've already got me laughing, and they've already got me in a good mood. And you guys are really great fun for participating in that whole thing. So please, this Sunday, January 19th, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, check it out. We will be playing those messages. Love to hear from you guys. And finally, last announcement, we are starting up again with our new season of Courtroom Confidential Conversations. And this coming Monday will be the latest episode where we interview Paul from Reporting Live from My Sofa. Paul is a hoot. Paul is fantastic. I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with him, and I think you guys are going to enjoy that as well. That will premiere on Monday, November 11th at Monday, January 11th, not November 11th, January 11th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Please join us in the chat. You guys are wonderful. Love seeing you all tonight. This was really fun. Had a really great time. Thank you guys again. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.